Tuesday on Shabbat. That's a very good name. I like it. Shabbat on Tuesday, rather. But we started it, and so I've been teaching there for those years. And since the Zoom, we do it on Zoom, and people come like this. And the methodology really is to offer a teaching based on the Parsha. That's kind of what I flow with. So today I'm really working with the Parsha, next Shabbat's Parsha, and also if there's a holiday or something like that. So we're coming to Lag BaOmer. So you're probably familiar with this. So what I try to do is get underneath some of the teachings of the Parsha, or if there's a holiday or some time, wherever we are in time, in Jewish time, and bring it in as a meditative practice so that we can receive the Torah in a very intimate kind of a way. That's really the methodology. So I want to talk about Parshat Emor and also Lag BaOmer, because that's coming on Friday. So I'm aware of both of these things. And Emor is part of the holiness code. If you're following along, we're in Leviticus, the priestly code, the holiness code. Last week we did this past Shabbos Kedoshim and Achrei Mot and Kedoshim. And here there are many different pieces in Emor. In each Parsha, there are many different pieces. We can't possibly take them all in. So I'm selecting a few and then going to move them into a practice. So first, just to flow with just to tell you what's in the Parsha, holiness in worship includes the regulations for the priest's holiness, their offerings, the regulations for priests' families, chief priests, choice of a wife for the Cohen Gadol, what is a disqualified Cohen priest, and then there's talk about what is sacred food, what are the blemished animals, and things like that. That's the whole first part of it. Then we move, and that's all temple. It's all related to temple. Of course, in Judaism, as you know, we still think a lot about what it was like in the temple time. So much of the Torah and then the Talmud altogether has so much about the priest, things that we don't do anymore. But what's interesting to me is this incredible attention to detail and the idea of the temple as where if we can just get it right, we can come together in one massive experience where we're going to really let go of our sins, our sorrows, our worries, our woes, our incompleteness, and enter into some kind of a completeness. Now we don't have the temple. So the next part of Emor is interesting because it's the holidays. It's the Sabbath and the holidays. And that's the part of Judaism that we do have. So that's also there. And then there's talk about the tabernacle and the bread and the incense and the things that we do, the light and the bread. We still do that, light and bread, without the tabernacle. And then there are other things. There's a story about somebody who's called a blasphemer, someone who curses the name of God. I'm not going to go into that altogether. It's very interesting. We're not going to go there. I want to start with really the whole thing about the priests and the Kohanim. And in particularly, I want to look at the section and look at it in a metaphoric way, because it's not what we're doing. It's not who we are right now. And it had to do with that system. But it inspires something internal, at least in me, that I want to share and bring us into a practice. So there's a section that is called the Disqualification of the Cohen. And this is what it says. It says, speak to Aaron. God spoke to Moses, speak to Aaron and say, no man of your offspring throughout the ages who has a defect, it's called a mum, shall be qualified to offer the food of his God. No one at all who has a mum, a defect, shall be qualified. No man who is blind or lame or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or a broken arm, or who is hunchback or a dwarf, or who has a growth in his eye, or has a boil scar or scurvy or crushed testes. No man among the offspring of Aaron, the priest, who has a defect shall be qualified to offer Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's offering by fire, having a defect. He shall not be qualified to offer his food for his God. He may eat of the food of his God, of the most holy, as well as of the holy, but he shall not enter behind the curtain or come near the altar, for he has a defect. Okay, you got that? That's hard. We realize it's not a practice now. But it's interesting. And I think there's some sense of identifying the outward mum or outward physical defect, or not fitting into some ideal of physical perfection, with an inner imperfection or not quite okay. And I think that's an idea that many of us hold, and many of us have, and has survived in a certain cultural way. There's a time now we're working with color of skin and sexuality and physical wellness, as can we expand our capacity to accept and really expand and reduce our sense of judgment. And then it comes to ourselves, our very selves. So we think about what are the mum? What is the mum? What are the defects in our own physicality, or maybe in our minds, or in our attitudes, or in ourselves, that we judge harshly? That we judge harshly and make us feel less than able to enter the holy space, or enter to be in the holy space, or unite with the offering of our heart, our mind, our soul, our spirit, and it could be age, it could be physical body stuff, the extra pounds that are seen to be somehow that we worry about, that we obsess about. Nora Ephron wrote a book about the neck years ago. It could be wrinkles, it could be teeth, it could be the nose. Years ago when I was a kid, there was a lot of people that had Jewish girls who had their noses fixed. It could be our sight that might not be good enough, or our hearing that we worry about, we obsess about, that take our energy away from our wholeness, our holiness, our connection to the goodness, to love. Or it could be, mistakes we made, or anxieties or jealousies that arise, that we don't even act on, but that just arise, that we worry about. The not good enoughness, the not good enoughness. So I want to offer this possibility to really connect to the holy and the wholeness, because I think that's what this is about. I think what practice is about. And it's not easy, but it is to embrace in holiness and divine, loving, spacious awareness, all of ourselves. So you might just start with taking a nice few deep breaths, and find yourself settling into your chair or your seat, and allow the belly to expand on the inhale, and then exhale. Just let that exhale be slow and long, so that your bones, your being rests on this earth. And just taking a few more deep breaths, and maybe letting go of worries or tensions for the moment. Just seeing if you can just release with that exhale. And thinking maybe there's an area that you're familiar with that is a place of judgment, a place of diminishment that you may have known in your life, or find now too short, ankles are too heavy. Everyone has something. Everyone has a moon. Everyone really does. The question is, can we embrace it? Can we feel it? Can we touch it? And can we embrace it with just loving awareness, the soul's awareness, so it doesn't hold us back? It leads us and lets us rest in our wholeness. Not a quick fix, but an ongoing invitation to practice. Because, the Cohen is allowed to eat with everyone. Cohen is allowed to be, the blemish is superficial. Whatever blemish, whatever imperfection. We know what they are. We don't have to share. Just rest in your own wholeness, if that is preferable to you. So we'll sit together in our worthiness, in our holiness, and our wholeness. Just allowing the breath to release and soften and bring you into that space of holy, loving awareness. So we'll just sit for a few minutes together. Our tradition teaches that the Cohen is sometimes compared to the moon. or we're compared to the moon in the sense of that we are perfect and whole, but sometimes we're seen in diminishment. But then we return to spiritual fullness. And that's the human condition, is there's always diminishment, waxing and becoming diminished. And can we remember the fullness, even in those moments of diminishment? So coming back together. And when I taught this morning, actually the same teaching at B'nai Jeshurun in New York, me sitting in Philadelphia, someone pointed out that last week, Parshat Kedoshim, we read the text, "You shall not put a stumbling block before the blind," which is such a teaching of generosity and calling upon ourselves to treat the other with loving kindness. So there's so much, we find it all, just like in ourselves, the complexity, so in the Torah, the complexity. So I'd like us to move to a different section. This high priest, and now the masses of the people, everybody. Now we're going to the general people, and that's what we were able to take with us into our lives and into the world, and into the diaspora, into the synagogue life, or the rabbinic Judaism. So there's a section in chapter 23. It talks about, again, God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them," all of them, okay, "These are my fixed times, the fixed times of God, which you shall proclaim as sacred occasions." And we start with the fixed time, which isn't such a fixed time. It's sort of interesting. It's every seventh day, the Sabbath. And it's a beautiful text about the Sabbath. "On the seventh day shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred occasion, Mikra Kodesh, shall do no work. It shall be a Sabbath of Yud-He Vav-He throughout your settlements." It's just a bringing down of the deepest possibility of spirituality. And then it goes on to talk about the holidays. The holidays, if you think about it, that's really the Jewish life. Sabbath and the holidays. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, but it's the Sabbath and the holidays where we can touch into our souls, our spirit, our tradition, our community. So complicated these days. And it all revolves around time in one way or another. And I suppose the deep spiritual question that we have for ourselves, and maybe that this is asking, is, what do we do with our time? The lifetime, the time of the day, how are we using our time? I'm not going to go there right now, but I think that's really what we're being constantly asked. What are we doing with our time? The gift of time. I know that's a question I ask myself. I have to ask myself, is it just habit, or is it discerned? Is there awareness? And I think some of the practice of mindfulness and meditation is to help us actually, how am I using my time? And so that's a question. But in the holidays, and I want to kind of do a little meditation with the holidays and the Sabbath, there's a lot of physicality. There's a lot of body. And I want to sit with some of the tastes and physical sensations that we have in this understanding of time. We can get very in our heads, and our practice of meditation is always to bring us back into our bodies. And I think the holidays and the Sabbath also wants us to come home in time to this space, this body. Where are we right now? Now is here. It's not here. It's here. So I was going to just invite us to feel a little bit of this holiday range. So just again, find your seat, your here and now, your place, and settle in. And I like to settle in with a couple of breaths. Nice deep belly breaths, if that's comfortable for you. And really breathing in and out. and letting the breath just bring you into your body. The spine being lifted and the hips and legs rooted, grounded. So first we're going to pass over. And I like to identify Passover with the tastes, almost being able to taste and sort of feel your mouth and tongue. And you might remember some really special tastes, matzah, macaroons, maror, the bitterness or the sweetness of that charoset or the sweet wine. You just sort of allow the sweetness to flow through your body or that intensity. Or you might have a special dish, an amazing masa lasagna. Just feel that so much through taste and even smell, almost smelling that sweet wine or grape juice. We often think about the spiritual qualities, but they're so surrounded and enmeshed in the physical qualities. I like to just let the sweetness flow through my body. And then, of course, we're in the midst of the counting of the Omer, those 7 times 7, the amazing time of the harvest, and some qualities of practicing the various qualities of each week. But I think counting can be a very embodied practice, just counting itself, bringing mind and body together. So I'd like to invite you to count 7 breaths. Just to start with a 7 with a 1 on the inhale, and exhale is 1. And inhale 2, exhale 2. Inhale 3, exhale 3. Inhale 4, exhale 4. Inhale 5, exhale 5. Inhale 6, exhale 6. Inhale 7, exhale 7. All the way to Shavuot, Revelation. And you might want to just take another round on your own, using your own breath, either the breath that comes to you or the breath that you take. Just do 1 inhale and 1 exhale. And don't worry if you get lost, you can always come back. You could start again, maybe one more time for the Omer meditation. If that's something that's good, or just sit with it. See if you can get to 7 again, just for the fun of it. And we land in Shavuot after 7 weeks, 7 breaths. And you may notice, you may not, but you may notice that the counting actually helps us stay with the breath. The counting actually is a concentration practice. It helps us stay with where we are, which is what the whole counting of the wheat is. And the counting, if we do it with the sphirot, with the qualities, the divine qualities, just counting helps us stay present. It's an interesting practice, an interesting invitation, very old and very basic to us. When we get to Shavuot, there's this strange sensual mix-up between seeing and hearing, and it's a little confusing. It's very altered. We're very altered by Shavuot. Very altered. It's like we've been on a 7-week mindfulness retreat, and revelation happens. It's not what we thought it was going to be. It's bigger. And I want to move us over to hearing, because that's the next holiday. After that, it's Rosh Hashanah, which is not called Rosh Hashanah in Torah. It's called the holiday of the sounding of the shofar. So it's a sound, and our hearing, which is so sensual, that brings us again into this moment. So I'd like to invite you to just hear. Listen, hearing. It's not about what you hear. It's about noticing, hearing sound. But you're not calling forth. Some of it's the sound of my voice. I will be quiet, and then you'll just hear what's there. And then maybe there's a chirp. Maybe there's a rustle. You don't have to name it. You don't have to stay with it. It won't stay with you. See if you could just notice sound, maybe something in the next room or in the house. Hearing, it may be very soft at home. So we'll just sit and see what we hear. What is the sound? None of the shofar. We may remember the shofar. It's just the sound of this life, this moment, arising and passing away. Nothing stays. Everything is impermanent, rising and passing. Don't grasp toward any sound. If you hear silence, hear silence. So I want to join together Yom Kippur, which is the next in the cycle, with Shabbat, because Yom Kippur is called Shabbat, Shabbaton, right here. And there's quite a few verses about Yom Kippur, what we're supposed to do, but it's Shabbat, Shabbaton. And we've already had Shabbat mentioned before even the other holidays, the profound power, the possibility of Shabbat. And when we say in the prayer, we bless Hamikadesh, the one who makes holy, the source of all life, who makes holy. Hamikadesh HaShabbat. First of all, Shabbat. Yisrael. Through Shabbat comes Israel's holiness, the Hazmanim and the holy days. It's as if when we actually can receive Shabbat, we could be vessels of holiness to other times. That's kind of what it's saying. And Shabbat Shabbaton, I love that phrase. It's a Shabbat of complete rest. And what do we know about rest in this world? What do we know about rest in this culture? We have a completely non-restful culture. Rest is not what we're taught in our society, in our culture. So this is really something. And for some people, actually, the pandemic has given them some inkling, a deeper inkling into rest. So I think it's really hard. And to know that Shabbat, as you have Shabbat on Tuesdays, I love that, because there actually is a text which says that Shabbat, in addition to meaning a day of the week, does mean a stable state of God consciousness. We can find Shabbat on Tuesday. It's actually possible because it's moving through us. And so it's about non-separation. I think rest is about letting go of me and my agenda and my need. And am I good enough? Am I doing enough? I mean, is it, and feeling whole and holy and union, non-separate. So let's take a few deep breaths and just see, what does rest feel like? Can we really rest in a moment? And what does it feel like? And can it connect us to something that's way greater than the me? And whenever me or my comes up, just say, letting go into rest, letting go into now, letting go into this, and just seeing what really needs to rest, what can rest a little more. Maybe the limbs, the fingers, the toes, maybe the shoulders, maybe the jaw, maybe the eyes, the ears, the belly. So let's just take our breaths, a few conscious breaths, and open to receiving Shabbat. Complete rest. Shabbat, Shabbaton, a connector to all that is, to the holy, the divine, all life, living presence. So maybe tasting that Shabbaton, maybe a little bit of rest. And let me ask a question of Phil at this point, which is, I have another piece, another whole meditation piece. Would probably take another 10, 15 minutes. I'm prepared to stay on for the other 15 minutes for our conversation. So that's good. We'll go with one more.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, please.
So I'm not doing Sukkot, but I'm sort of wrapping Sukkot up with this next one, which is purely my fantasy here. I didn't come across that in any sources. But I do want to talk about Lag BaOmer because that's going to be on Friday. And Lag BaOmer, if you're counting in the days, so this is the 5th day of the 5th week, and it has meaning if you're counting by the qualities. So it's the week of Hod. I love that word, Hod, and it's Hod Sheba Hod, the quality of Hod within the quality of Hod. And Hod has different meanings, different translations: majesty, splendor, glory, presence. It's also associated with Hodaya, which is gratitude, which I really like to think of it as gratitude within gratitude, Hod within Hod. And, you know, the 33rd day of the Omer is a special day. It's mentioned actually in the Talmud, and it's mentioned then over in the 12th, 13th century. It's definitely not biblical, but even though the counting is right there in the Parsha and more, but not the 33rd day and all of that stuff about it. But it tells us in the Talmud that Rabbi Akiva was part of the rebellion of Bar Kokhba in the year 135 CE. After the destruction of the temple in 70, there was a rebellion against the Romans. God bless the Jews. We thought we could beat the Romans. You know, God is on our side. You know, and Rabbi Akiva, and you know, it didn't succeed. It was fairly disappointing. Plus, there was a plague, and we're told that there were 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, and they died in this plague. And only 5 survived. And one of the ones who survived was Shimon Bar Yochai, interestingly enough, who becomes, in medieval fantasy, the author of the Zohar, the Jewish mystical text. It's ascribed back to him. He was also a very important great sage. So, and he's considered a great sage. So it's interesting. We're watching the ripening of the harvest. And now it's conflated with a period of mourning, of some mourning. And you may know in some communities, there are no weddings during this time, you know, no haircuts. Some people don't shave their beards, various kinds of things. And on the 33rd, on Hod Sheba Hod, on Lag BaOmer, which is Friday, that's broken. That's the day the plague ended and there was a respite. So we know something about plagues these days. It's not only the 10 plagues, and it's not only this particular plague, but it's our own experience of plague, pandemic, and breaking and relief as well, and the complexity of that. Shimon Bar Yochai's yortzeit, interestingly enough, the anniversary of his death is considered also to be Lag BaOmer. And in a lot of the Sephardic communities, North African communities, it's a phenomenal day. They cut the hair, there are big fires and bonfires and celebrations, and there's a pilgrimage to Mount Meron in Jerusalem in the Galil, and that's where his grave is. And it's called Hilula, and it's I actually participated in it many, many years ago, not really knowing, being Ashkenazi, not really knowing about it, but I ended up on a bus with people going up there from the Negev. And it's kind of an amazing thing. And the belief is that when a great mystic, sage dies, their spiritual light and blessing shines on the world. And you can actually get the shine, get the glow of their life and their achievements, their spiritual accomplishments in your own life, which is kind of amazing. So that's another reason for Lag BaOmer and the plague being lifted and all of that. So it's interesting, the mixture. And I think, we're in the middle of this pandemic, or the end or the middle, we don't know, we don't really know. But there also are holidays to celebrate. There's also vaccinations. There are also people getting together more with each other, and people giving hugs they haven't gotten in a long, long time. So there's this big expansion, this Hod Shabbat, which I associate with Sukkot, the joy of Sukkot and the festival of Sukkot, and the shaking of the lulav. It's an expanded time, and I mean, Sukkot is also a complicated time if you think about it. They're in the wilderness and they have the sukkah, and even so, it's the fall and it's going towards the winter. So, every time it's like the moon, the cycle, the challenges, and then can we at the same time rest in the big expansion, in the big expansiveness. So I see Hod Shabbat, Lag BaOmer, is that time of expansion. And I like to have us sit for at least a few minutes in that sense of big expansion. And you might want to even say Hod on the in-breath, Shabbat on the out-breath, and really see if you can feel, you can sit and again feel yourself. And I like to think of sometimes breathing Hod into the back body and having my back expand. And then exhale, Hod, and just feeling the release and the expansion of the limbs. And breathing Hod all the way up, spine to the crown. And Hod all the way down, down, down. Through the spine into the ground. So wherever you can feel it expanding and releasing into a further expansion, really expansion, expansion, Hod Shabbat, Hod, even that word is so expansive. So let's sit with this as we come towards Lag BaOmer and come hopefully towards a time of expansion, health, well-being in our communities, in our country, in our world. The time of where care can expand, where justice and love can expand, where gratitude can expand. Hodaya, connection. Hod Shabbat. So we can come back together. And we've taken a nice tour through and more preparing us for this week. And I'm very open to hearing questions or comments, or I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thank you, Sheila. And by the way, please put questions in the chat, and I'll be sure to try to get everybody's questions in the next few minutes. I had a couple of questions for you, because you started out with this idea of diminishment. And then you talked about how the importance of taking our focus off of ourselves. And you talk about this in your book. So I'll give you another plug for the book because I love it. And it's called God Loves the Stranger. And you talk about this idea of fall down and get up, the idea of yerida, a yerida moment. And he said something very interesting here, which is the mind has a tendency to fabricate messages that often begin with the first person pronoun. I am angry. I am not a good meditator. I am not a good person, friend, or parent. I am hot. I am uncomfortable. I am sleepy. And you suggest a shift, which is I'm not doing anything. These feelings are happening. These sensations are just happening. It's not about the individual. So I wonder if you can talk about how we can use that to bring us up from this sense of falling.
Thank you. Beautiful question. That's very central, of course, to our practice. And it is based on the idea that we are actually the divine image. Our essential nature is goodness, wholeness, and love. You look at a baby, you see that. And that's definitely a part of our, that's the part that we want to identify with. That's the wholeness to identify with. But of course, there's also fear, and there's struggle, and we're wired also for survival. So there's anxiety and all of those things. But I would like to say that that's not who we are. So when we practice and we take our deep breaths and we settle, we want to settle into, and that, came with the Ahava Rabbah, the Shema, and all of that. We are loved by an unending love. We are one with all. We are connected. There is only really one. There is only really echad anyway. So of course we are individuals and we have many qualities that are unique, but we also have aspects of us that are wounded aspects, that are wounded. And rather than identify those as myself, I want to touch those wounded parts with my bigger, loving heart. I want to bring them closer and acknowledge, when I have thoughts about, I should lose weight, or why didn't I do better on this, or what's the matter with it? If they're sometimes they can lead us to wisdom, but not if they're automatic, and not if they're just, habitual. We have to touch those parts with our awareness. And that's what we try to develop in practice. And then allow them to rest, and then see if there's some insight, I could do better. I want to do better. Because judging ourselves does not lead us to good qualities. It leads us to separate. So this can be talked about at great length, but it is something that I believe connects our Jewish practice, our Judaism, with our meditation practice, with our spiritual growth. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's a life work. It's a life's work.
Right. Absolutely. That's beautifully stated. I wanted to ask you also about the last meditation we did. First of all, thank you for walking us through the cycle of the Jewish year the way you did. And there was so much there. You could take any one of those things, from the memory of the Pesach Seder to the sounds, to the breath, to the internal work, to the idea of Shabbat and ceasing for a moment. I would encourage you. By the way, I'm recording this, and so if you want to revisit this, please do, because there's just a tremendous amount to unpack there. But the last thing was about a mantra, and I studied transcendental meditation for many years, and they give you a mantra, which actually is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. And I found that by bringing meaningful phrases into my meditation, it takes me so much beyond. And I want to point out one more chapter in your book, Sheila, about mantras. And you offer some really interesting ones. So I want people to understand that when you repeat a phrase, it doesn't have to be something that's a mystical sounding phrase. And so here's your list. And I want to ask you how serious you are about these. It's okay. It's just what is here. Befriending yourself. Underdoing. Good enough. Starting from where you are. Trusting the path. And about 20 more of these. Can we use these? And how would we use these?
Well, you can use it in any way you like. I mean, for me, it was whenever I got into a painful place. Because the tendency is, if I'm sitting and I'm going into a painful place, I'll start to think, how can I get out of this? Or I'll judge it. I'm not supposed to be, this or that.
Mhm.
It's a lot about giving permission to what is. It's a pursuit of the truth.
Mhm. And
It's
what's
emet.
present now?
Present now. This is
Mhm.
emet. Emet is, a name of God, a seal of God, right? Emet. It's just
Mhm.
what is. And we are so conditioned to be rejecting, judging, that was with the moon thing at the beginning,
Mhm.
and, we could create more space. I mean, it's not our fault. We're products of our conditioning, of our upbringing,
Right.
and I think, the spiritual life can be oppressive and can make you, even the meditation can make you feel, I'm a bad meditator. Why can't you concentrate better? In all the years I've been teaching meditation, that is one of the things I've heard more than anything else. I'm a bad meditator.
Right. And that keeps people from digging in further. And so please don't be discouraged if you're having difficulty. This is what it is. It's the struggle. Yeah. There were a couple of questions here in the chat, and this goes to the heart of what you were saying earlier about some things that might bother us, and in this case, teachings in the Torah. There are some teachings in the Torah that might be not so spiritual. And so rabbis do a really great job. Sometimes you have to tie yourself in knots to talk your way around some of those things. But and so the question is specifically, how do you justify those portions?
I don't justify it. It's the Torah has everything in it, just like life. Some things you
Right.
like, some things you don't like. I mean, and the rabbis over the centuries have done basically two things. One thing is they ignore stuff they don't like, which is fine. You can ignore it. You can just ignore it. If you don't want to ignore it, you can make it say what you want it to say, which is what the whole tradition does constantly. It's constantly doing that. That's why it's alive, because we're always working with it and looking at it and trying to, so we can reject it and we can also elevate it. That makes it fun. That makes it interesting,
Right.
that makes it worthwhile because we're in interaction with, and it's us. We're bringing ourselves. If we were just to say, it's not a catechism.
Mm-hmm.
We don't say Torah like a cat. Like, this is the truth and this is the truth. Truth, needs our own involvement, investigation, relationship.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of things that are awful in Torah, horrifying from a modern ear, from a woman. no doubt.
Yeah. Beautiful answer. Thank you. And final question. Can you share a bit about your personal spiritual practice?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I am now a member of 2 synagogues, Germantown Jewish Center, and I joined online B'nai Jeshurun. It was really interesting. It's gone through ups and downs and sideways. I don't put on tefillin. I had a period where I did, but I don't. I do have a talit that I wear on Shabbat. I'm a regular Shabbat davener now. But I do practice every day. And my daily practice consists of it varies. It varies from prayer and sitting. There's usually a period of sitting, and there's usually some kind of prayer that I do on my own. And then I do yoga. And I do spiritual direction. So I am a spiritual director, and I'm in spiritual direction. And I also have several chevrutot. I have several people that I study with. In fact, Jonathan Slater is one of the people. He's one of my chavrutas.
And one of my teachers.
So it's a great place. And we study various things, mostly Jewish texts, but not always. And back in the day, I used to do a lot of retreats. Now I have I started every other month, I do a retreat day with a friend of mine. And we devote an entire day. She's in Massachusetts, I'm in Philadelphia. I devote an entire day just to prayer and meditation and spiritual conversation.
Oh, that's
But
great.
I do a lot of spiritual direction with other people, which for me is my being the director is actually an amazing spiritual practice for myself.
We have been thinking about doing some retreats with this group. So and we'd love to have you as a guest when we do that. And just finally, could you tell us a little bit about the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, since you mentioned Jonathan, and
Yes.
how we can all get involved in
Sure. Well, I was one of the early founders, I guess, of the Institute, along with Rachel Cohen, who, Aleha Shalom, passed away 3 years ago. And our goal really started being directed at clergy, feeling that Jewish clergy, rabbis and cantors really needed a place where they could deepen their spiritual lives. That was the essence of it. That's where we started. And we began by studying, we joined in particularly with certain sources that we found were particularly spiritually evocative, and a lot from Hasidut. But we also used other sources, including Zohar, but these were bringing people into it deep. And we taught meditation, we taught yoga and other practices, Musar, and brought rabbis and cantors on retreats. But it started to grow because the lay people we had this fantasy that if rabbis and cantors would deepen in their spirituality, they would bring it out to their congregants, which is true, but not for everybody, only for some. The lay people wanted it too. So we started programs for lay people, and then we started programs to train people to teach meditation. And now it's really grown a great deal. And during the pandemic, there are various programs that can be brought to communities. They're the prayer projects that you've experienced. There's a Tikkun Midot project that can be done on distance. And there's also daily meditations. In your time zone, 9:30 to 10, I guess, 12:30 to 1. And they have online retreats. There's many, all kinds of stuff going on now, and some wonderful teachers. I'm no longer on the faculty or on the staff. I am retired, but I still work, as I say, as a spiritual director from time to time. Okay. Events like this, join you like
here
this.
Wants to try to connect with you. So since you do some teaching independently, one-on-one, is it possible that people can study with you privately?
It's possible. Right now, it's not study. I don't do studying one-on-one. I do spiritual direction, which is much different. It's actually more meditative.
Okay. So if
It's
someone wants to get in
meditating with
touch,
somebody else.
contact me and I'll put you in touch with the
Yeah,
rabbi.
yeah, yeah,
Sounds like the best thing.
yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It was an inspiration, and we're going to spend the next few weeks in our own meditations, unpacking and expanding on the wonderful kernels of and beautiful teachings that you gave us today. So it's been really a great pleasure.
Well, I'm so glad. It was such a wonderful connection. I'm lovely to be with you. And I'm so glad it will give you inspiration for the future because you're doing great work as it is here, clearly. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
blessings and good health and well-being to everybody.
Great. And everyone, please come Tuesday morning at 10:30 if you can for Shabbat on Tuesdays, or Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. for our prayer meditation. And wonderful to be together with everyone. So thank you.
Bye-bye.